1. Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum. We got some exciting stuff to talk about today, and of course, we have a very special guest starting off the show with us in about the next 20 minutes or so. We'll be joined by Channing Crowder, former Miami Dolphins linebacker, to discuss various Dolphins topics. The linebackers, I'm sure, are going to be a very poignant topic with him, and we'll also talk about the rest of the defense, and probably we'll get his opinion on what kind of impact Adam Gase will make on the Miami Dolphins. Then later on, we'll talk with some Dolphins offense, since we can't talk defense without offense. And then we're going to go into a little bit of the NFL Combine. I want to just discuss what kind of things we could learn from it, if there's anything significant to learn from it at all. But since we're going to be waiting for Channing for a little while, I want to go ahead and get started and see if we can talk about some of the things that have been going around Ryan Tannehill, because we're just going to see if we can't go ahead and get our quarterback talk out of the way first. So recently, somebody on ESPN, I can't remember exactly who it was. I need to find that, actually. But somebody said that Ryan Tannehill was actually only made a bad throw on only 0.7% of his throws. And if you can do something like that, then you are an elite quarterback. Now, obviously, nobody here actually believes that Ryan Tannehill is an elite quarterback. And some people are even trying to have a hard time suspending their disbelief that he's a good quarterback. So then there's the Mel Kiper Jr. Recent report saying that there is no more excuses for Ryan Tannehill. Essentially, this is the judgment year. He has to either get it done and no more excuses. Okay, well, personally, I don't like Mel Kiper's way of looking at it, because once again, it really feels very obvious that it's not a matter of excuses. It's a matter of overall help that he's gotten. The defense has been awful. The offensive line has been miserable, and a lot of people who have gone into the film study and are being completely objective about it and are not constantly looking at the team, and not, I guess you could say, from an outsider's perspective, somebody who watches film and doesn't have this idea of relationships with the players. Everybody else who looks at the Dolphins says that, holy crap, that offensive line is just awful, and Ryan Tannehill is lucky to be alive. So, Chad, I want to ask you, how do you feel about Mel Kiper essentially saying this is it? He either needs to I'm not going to go there, but this is the case. He either needs to get it done or get out. What do you feel about Mel Kiper's statements?
I'm not a big advocate of Mel Kiper post-draft. I think he, like Mike Mayock and those guys, that's what they specialize in. That's what they do for their jobs or their careers, is they spend a ton of time watching tape and pouring over college prospects. They're a lot better than the average analyst at understanding where people are going to go in the draft and what people perform in the combine. So I feel like Mel Kiper is pretty good if you're looking for a knowledgeable guy about college prospects. But once that passes and a guy goes into the NFL, I just don't think Mel Kiper knows all that much what he's talking about if you're trying to evaluate a pro player in the pro game. That's not what he does. So I really don't think what he has to say carries a lot of weight, I guess, when it comes to the NFL level and analyzing the NFL players. In general, I think that doesn't. I don't know how they're defining a good pass, as if the read was good or if the actual throw was good. Those are two different things in my mind. I think Tannehill is definitely above average at reading defenses. I think people don't realize that often, that he does a pretty good job at avoiding putting balls in bad spots. Nobody's perfect, but he doesn't throw a lot of passes into coverage and a lot of, passes that are high risks to get intercepted. Where he gets to be a little more inconsistent is, I don't know if he's as accurate as I'd like to see out of him. When he has a receiver, does he get the ball in a position that allows the receiver to continue to run with it, hitting him in stride and not missing guys. So I do see him struggle a little time with the consistency in his accuracy. And one other, if you're talking weaknesses of Tannehill, he still doesn't have very good pocket presence, and that's something I believe that you can get better at. You can coach his pocket presence, but he tends to not see the blitzes coming in at times or feel it, and a lot of times he doesn't feel where the pressure is coming from. And I don't know how that gets coached, but you see a lot of the great quarterbacks are good at sliding up in the pocket, or they're good to kind of sliding away from the pressure, and I think those are things that he could improve on. But like I said, I absolutely feel he's in the top half of the league. I'm not going to try to argue he's a top 10 quarterback, but I definitely think he's a top 15. And I think in the NFL, if you have a top 15 quarterback, it's absolutely insane to be worried about getting rid of that quarterback. I have no issue if you want to try to bring in another quarterback to potentially compete with Ryan Tannehill, maybe in a year or two, that if you feel like Tannehill doesn't progress to where he's at and you think you got a clear top 10 quarterback over him and you want to, give him the job, that's fine. But until you do, you absolutely cannot even compete whatsoever in the NFL without at least a decent quarterback. And at least Miami has one. And I don't think they'd had one. I mean, you could say Chad Pennington, for the limited time he quarterbacked was decent, but after him, they were always struggling at the quarterback position, and it just doesn't go high on my radar right now, and I don't see why this year is so different than any other year for Tannehill. If he was really, really struggling at picking things up, I would get that, but I guess I don't see why this is the year Tannehill has to step up any more than any other season.
I think the problem is that Mel Kiper, first of all, not a whole lot of people like Mel Kiper, and there is reasons for that, not the least of which is his hairdo, but we won't go into that. But Mel Kiper, I don't know. He seems to think that he's the ultimate expert in all things draft, and I don't remember exactly what Mel Kiper's position on Ryan Tannehill was. Maybe I don't remember if he liked him or not, but my guess is that they have this idea of a quarterback can only have so much time before it's time to say move on. It doesn't matter how it went, doesn't matter what the circumstances are. He needs to go away because he's obviously not making the team around him better. So, and again, I don't understand. If you have Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, then maybe you can make the argument that the quarterback makes the team around him better. Cam Newton, for a lot of the year, made the team around him better, but I've always also attributed that to his ability to run with the football. His running game was always on point most of the time. You had that incredible defense that is essentially helped carry that team to the Super Bowl, and then they kind of fell apart to the number one ranked defense. So, I mean, Cam Newton had 5 years. Last year was his 5th year in the league, and he finally woke up, quote unquote, woke up. He was always talented. We always knew that he could be a special quarterback, but it took him 5 years to finally get that game clicking. So, and mind you, before this year, everybody was saying that Cam Newton's not good enough. He's just not gonna be able to get the team over the hump. And then lo and behold, he manages to pull it off. Now, will Ryan Tannehill do that? I don't see that happening. But there is the whole idea of exactly what it is that Ryan Tannehill will be able to do. If you give Ryan Tannehill an offensive line, which he still hasn't had all his career, and I think that Carolina's offensive line was pretty good. It wasn't terrific, but it was pretty good most of the time. You give him a running game consistently. Nobody ran the ball more times in the regular season than Jonathan Stewart, if I'm correct. And Cam Newton ran the ball more than any other quarterback in the league. So there was a running game there. And of course, that number 2 ranked overall defense. They got to the Super Bowl. They made it happen. It was the ultimate team football. The only one who had better team football was Denver, and that's why they won the Super Bowl. But here's Ryan Tannehill. What has he had to work with? His running game has been there, but once it shows up, it has to go away again because it's like a party crasher. You're not supposed to be here. You need to get out. Then you have the offensive line. It never showed up to the party. It kind of accepted the invitation and then decided to just not show up, and you made the party a drag. And then you have, of course, the whole issue of the defense. They showed up, got drunk, and then passed out on the couch or something because they were hungover. So what has Ryan Tannehill had that gives anybody the reason to say, well, he's just not going to do it? He's had no help. Every year it's been something, and you can make it an excuse. You can say it's an excuse if you want to, but really it's a matter of, if you want to be a playoff team, you have to have the whole team firing on all cylinders. Most teams that were in the playoffs, every piece of it was firing on all cylinders. The teams who weren't and somehow made the playoffs anyway, see the Texans, were posers from the beginning, and everybody pretty much knew they didn't belong in the playoffs. So we have a caller, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is. Caller, reveal yourself.
Hey, what's going on, man? It's Crowder.
What's up, Channing? Glad to have you on with us, man. Really appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me. What you up to?
Well, we were just discussing the whole Ryan Tannehill situation. I'm sure you've heard the various reports coming out of ESPN. One of which was saying how Ryan Tannehill only made bad decisions on his throws on 0.7% of his throws, and then you have Mel Kiper like 2 days later coming out and saying no more excuses for him. So since you just joined us and we're on this topic, I'm going to ask you, Channing Crowder, what is your opinion on the various reports coming out about the Dolphins quarterback?
Well, Ryan Tannehill, man, it's interesting to me. I was a big fan of his. I like athletic guys. I like ball players. And with his background, being a wide receiver, being an athlete, seeing him run the read option and things that they've just dabbled in, it made me be a Tannehill fan. Last year was when I kind of started jumping off the bandwagon because I don't think he was developing as he was supposed to moving through his career. He has been through a lot of offensive coordinators. If you want to count Zach Taylor, if you want to count Laser, you got to go back to Mike Sherman. It's tough to really get on top of your game. Even you look at a guy like Peyton Manning, he takes his offense with him. He ran the same offense in Denver that he did in Indy. They would change it when Brock Osweiler got in there, but he was comfortable in his system. Tannehill hasn't got comfortable in the system yet, but I also see his development, knowing where to throw the ball, reading the safeties, and going to his third and fourth option. He hasn't developed the mental part of the game. And I heard you talking about excuses. Is that an excuse for Tannehill? I think the first couple of years it was. He didn't have an offensive line. He got sacked more times. Up to this point, as we talk today, he's been the most sacked quarterback since he entered the league. So he doesn't have the protection, but he's also getting thrown in so many systems that you would think he would struggle. But it's just the passing, the decisions he makes. I saw that. They said he makes a bad throw every 0.7% of the time. We would win more games if he only made a bad decision less than 1% of a game or less than 1% of a season. So speaking of Tannehill, I like him as an athlete. He's not progressing mentally as a quarterback because I've played with guys like Chad Pennington, and I've played with guys like a Dante Culpepper when he came and went to hell when he left Minnesota, hurt his knee and all that. So I played with a large range of quarterbacks. My one criticism of Tannehill, I still think he could be an NFL quarterback. I just don't think he's developing fast enough on his own. I don't care if you have 1,000 coordinators. Some of the reads, some of the checks, some of the decisions he makes are safer than trying to go win a game. I used to say it all the time. If you're trying not to lose, you're not going to win. He's making the safe throw, the dump off, the little check down. Jarvis Landry broke the Dolphins record for 2 seasons with receptions, but he's not getting any big plays. He's a possession receiver. Tannehill has a strong arm. You had a guy like Mike Wallace who was a blazer. You had a guy this year, Kenny Stills, who can get down the field. Cameron Jordan, who was a threat in the red zone, a taller guy, played well in some games but just wasn't utilized. Tannehill can be an NFL quarterback, and I say it all the time. If he leaves the Dolphins let him go, he will be a starting quarterback. He just has to have somebody, in my mind, to develop him into the quarterback he should be because he is not moving fast enough for me seeing this last season.
Well, my thoughts on it, Channing, is that, like you brought up, like his offensive line has been awful. And, I mean, just look at all the quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, how many of them succeed despite having what Ryan Tannehill has lacked? I mean, just an example, like you see Tom Brady. Now, I would not dare to presume to compare Ryan Tannehill to Tom Brady as an athlete or a quarterback, but you have this comparison here. Whenever Tom Brady's offensive line just kind of, I don't know, takes a day off, suddenly Tom Brady looks very much not Tom Brady-ish. So I feel like that if we finally gave him, like I've called it the Great Wall of Foxborough for a very long time. They don't get to touch the guy, and most of the time he knows where he's going to throw the ball before the ball's even snapped. So that really helps a lot in his getting the ball out of the pocket quickly. So, but Ryan Tannehill does not have that luxury. He also does not have that brick wall, and I'm sure Brady's going to have his back since his offensive line coach has unretired. I'm sure he's jumping for joy at that. But I feel like he hasn't gotten a lot of the help that a lot of other quarterbacks have. And when you expect somebody who has had that instability, you've heard all these reports coming out about how they didn't trust him, they didn't give him the basic privileges that most starting quarterbacks get in the NFL. Like, how many quarterbacks do not get to audible out of do not even get to check out of a play? I mean, if you really believe that he cannot do it, then you need to just go ahead and let him fall on his face so that you can finally say, no more. You're just not good enough. But if you take that out of his hands, then you are essentially giving people excuses to say, well, why don't you just let him try? And that just lets the whole thing drag out longer.
Yeah, he had that part of it, the mental development part of it, because starting there, a check and audible is when you see the defense, you see the strength, you see where they're coming from, you see a blitz, the same way you see the whole thing, Omaha, the Peyton Manning thing. Tom Brady kicks his knee 100 times and lets the defense show their hand. Tannehill, if he doesn't have the ability to check, why is he going to learn the defense? Why is he going to be able to see those safeties, those linebackers cheating, those corners cheating? Because he can't check anyway. That big picture development is really what Ryan Tannehill needs, and I'm with you. You throw it on the wall. Throw all the crap on the wall and see what sticks. I remember Mike Nolan came in to the Dolphins, I want to say after Cam left. We bring in Mike Nolan, who was San Francisco head coach, and me and Carlos Dansby were the linebackers. And he brought a defense in a very, very diverse defense, a lot of checks. Simple to learn, but once the game starts, you can go from man-to-man to cover 2 to cover 3 with one guy moving 2 or 3 feet to the left or right. And we knew, me and Carlos were smart enough players, that we knew he was holding back on his play calls. And we had to go to him and say, Coach, listen, if me and Carlos Dansby are in the game, me and Carlos are right there. If we're in the game, call whatever you want to call. If the call is not articulated to the defense, if there's not 11 guys on the same page, put it on us. But you got to believe in us mentally so that physically we can go out on the field and do it. That's what the NFL is about. I tell people all the time, you get into all you see the high school teams with the best players usually win the national championship. And then in college, it gets back to coaching. Like Nick Saban can recruit and out-coach everybody, out-recruit and out-coach. He's going to win national championships. People think it keeps going to coaching when you get in the NFL, the better coaches. It gets back to fundamentals, and they say X's and O's and Jimmys and Joes. And the NFL gets back to Jimmys and Joes. If you have Tannehill and you're holding him back, you can't develop your X's and O's or your Jimmys and Joes because you don't trust your Jimmy or your Joe, and so now you can't develop on the scheme side, the X's and O's, working through your progressions, changing from a run to a pass, from a run right to a run left. When you get to the NFL, it's a bigger picture of what the top players, a quarterback. There's 4 positions. You got your quarterback, your corner, your left tackle, and your pass rusher. Those are your big name guys. Those are your guys that have to make a difference every game. If you're holding any of those positions back or any of those positions aren't capable of playing at the NFL on the physical level and the mental level, you're in trouble. And with Tannehill, it seems like they might know something we don't know about him, but you have to see if he can play the mental side of this game to see if he's going to be a starting quarterback. We're too far into his career to still be where we are. We're talking right now about it. Is he that guy? Is he not that guy? Why haven't you made him show you, are you this guy or not? If you go out there and we give you full run of this offense and we lose by 30 week after week after week, we need to replace you. But, oh, no, like you said, before I got on, there's always that excuse out there because everyone that watches football and knows football sees that they're not demanding Ryan Tannehill to run the offense, know the offense, and be an intricate part of the offense. Last year, when they fired Bill Lazor, Zach Taylor comes in and says, I think I'm going to give Tannehill a little more pull, a little more, opinion on the offense. This is his 5th or 4th season. He hasn't had any opinion of what plays he's going to give to his troops. He's the captain. He's the general. He's out there on that field. If the players don't know that he has command, who the hell else is running this team? I know Mike Pouncey has the personality. I know he's the center. He touches the ball every play, but he can't do what Ryan Tannehill or therefore any other quarterback in the league can do. So if you're handcuffing a guy like that, you're hurting yourself and your team. They might know more than we know, but if you can't decide by this point if he's that guy, I think you might have to move on.
Hey, Channing, this is Chad Roundup. I'm the co-host with Lewis. We really appreciate you coming on the show. And we wanted to change the gears because we had a question to ask you on the defensive side of the football. And this is something I hear a lot, from different commentators and analysts and stuff. But I just want to get your opinion, having been a player and in particular a linebacker. I hear people say, and this is kind of pertaining to James Laurinaitis from the Rams, as a potential free agent in the market that could help the Dolphins. And people say, well, he's played a ton of snaps. He has a lot of snap counts. He's played a lot of football. And my question is that something that's real? If you're looking at a guy who's, say, like James Laurinaitis, who's 29, but he's played a ton of snaps, versus a guy that's, Cameron Wake is an example where he's 34, but he hasn't probably played more snaps, but he's 5 or 6 years older. Is when you look at a player, are you more concerned with the snap counts he's had, or are you more concerned with his age?
It is where how far along is he? There's only, I don't know, you can count them 10,000, 20,000, 100,000. I had knee problems, so my saying is there's only so many bends in each knee. And when them bends run out, there's going to be a problem. You're going to have an ACL, you're going to have an MTL, or you might have one of those freak injuries. But if you can look at a guy at his prime, and loving linebackers, being a linebacker guy, the only time people ask me, do I miss football? The only time I miss football is when I see bad linebacker play. So every game I watch the linebackers because what I love was my craft since I was 10 years old. Laurinaitis didn't play well last year. So did he have a down year? Or can you look at him 3 or 4 years ago when he was balling, he was, leading the league in tackles at some points, and did you see a physical change? Is he not strong? Is his flexibility gone? Is he not bending down? Is he not in his knees and hips? Is he not as explosive as he used to be? Because even when you saw Ray Lewis win the Super Bowl, if you go back and watch that Super Bowl game and go watch Ray Lewis in the first Super Bowl they won with Trent Dilfer, you will see two separate linebackers. Ray Lewis was a bull in a china shop in this last Super Bowl. He was the best player on the field, MVP in his first Super Bowl. So the age thing, people get into the age because they assume most guys get in the league around 21, 22. So at 32, you're 10 years in. 28, you're 6, 7 years in. And that's what you want to do. It has nothing to do with age. It has to do with, like you say, snap count. But with Laurinaitis, some people could take more snaps than others. Zach Thomas played every snap for 10 years with limited injuries. But remember, once Zach started getting those concussions, it was game after game. He might miss one game, but he always get a stinger. He always get dinged up. And that's when the Dolphins released him. He went to Dallas first, then Kansas City. The age, I think people put on a pedestal more than where is he at. If he was a bag of chips, is there some crumbs in the bottom, or is there still some damn chips in that bag? And with Laurinaitis, that's the evaluation you have to do. If I was evaluating Laurinaitis, I would go back and watch him in 2009, and I would see what he looked like this year and see how far along, how many shoulder surgeries, how many shoulder injuries. Is he not explosive? Is he not getting off blocks? Can he not run with the tight end anymore? Can he not cover the backs anymore? It's more about your functionality than your age or your snap count. Can you still do it? And if you can, I want you on my team. If you're slowing down, you might can play first or second down for me, but I'm not putting my entire defense in your hands. So it's more about the player than just saying the age or the snap count. Different guys are built different. God made me have, I had 13 knee surgeries. Some guys had no surgeries. They just, maybe the concussions got to them. So it's player to player, but a lot of, I don't want to, so many words, lazy people just want to go with, oh, he's old, he can't play. Well, I've seen some hellified players. Darryl Green, you've seen Champ Bailey, you've seen Charles Woodson that were playing at a high level in their mid and late 30s. So what's the difference between them? They were built different. So I need to see what Laurinaitis is built like before I can say if he's played too many snaps or not.
So when to do that, do you think like what a team does, and do they bring him in and put him through something like combine drills, or do you rely more on the film, or just to see what his 40 times are, to see what his bench reps are and stuff like that? I guess I'm trying to get a feel for how do you, like, if you're the GM of the Dolphins and you got to make that decision, how do you go about doing that? Like what tests would you do, or what would you look at?
Well, I'll have a lot of respect for Bill Belichick. So when the Dolphins released me, the first team to call, they called my agent the day I got released, were the New England Patriots. They brought me to New England, coming out of Florida pre-draft, worked me out. They were planning on drafting me. I guess I don't know when the hell, but sometime the Dolphins got me ahead of them. But when the Dolphins released me, they called. They already evaluated my film. You know that because they want to see what you did most recently. But when I went up, it wasn't a combine drill. Bill Belichick, Adam Gase now, Pete Carroll, Mike McCarthy, great coaches. I train some ball players now, some college guys. You have to play football to play football. The last time I ran a three-cone drill, a 40, or a shuttle, or a 40-inch vertical and all that was at the combine in 2005 and at my pro day in 2005. And I played with the Dolphins, for 6 years. That's not football anymore. When I went to New England, Bill Belichick and the linebacker coach came out there, and they put me and another guy, Tim Dobbins, actually. He was on the Dolphins for a while. We were free agents together through football drills, through drops. They had a scout team tight end come out. They had us run with the tight end, cover and make breaks. They want to see if you can still play football. After you get in the NFL, those 40 times and the drills and the three-cone and, I'm so quick, I have a 38-inch vertical. Does your 38-inch vertical make you knock guys out or get touchdowns, or are you a and one dunker in street ball? Because a lot of guys have high verticals that can't translate it onto the field. So to answer your question, simply, they're going to bring Laurinaitis in. First, everybody evaluates your film. The eye in the sky doesn't lie is an old cliche. But they're going to bring him in, and they're going to make him do football because you have to see a guy play football to see if a guy can play football, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Yeah, you mentioned something very interesting a little earlier, and I'm actually going to continue on that because it's very poignant to the Dolphins right now. You said that the only time that you miss football is when you see bad linebacker play. And correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think the Miami Dolphins have had a very bad linebacker play for the past couple of years now, whether it's Philip Wheeler or Kelvin Shepard or all those other guys. It's like it seems like it was bad, and I really feel like that the biggest problem with Ndamukong Suh last year was not Ndamukong Suh himself. It was more along the lines of that the linebackers couldn't fill up the holes that he was making. Would you agree with that assessment?
Oh, yes. I don't know if you heard me talk about it, but football, the linebackers last 2 years, they find blockers. They don't look at schemes. They don't read the back. They don't read the pace of the back. If your defensive tackle is getting double teamed, you got to play fast because two men sitting on one guy, they're not going to move that much. If he's getting single teamed and you see him winning his battle, now you slow it down. Stuff I learned from Zach Thomas, stuff I learned from Junior Seau. They don't know how to do football. They went and got track stars. Philip Wheeler is a blade. He's a personal friend of mine. He can run, but he didn't know the hands. He didn't, the fits and things is where you saw him struggle. These young guys they have now. Koa Misi was a defensive end. Played with him. I love him. He's a converted defensive end. So the way that I see the game, the way Zach saw the game, the way, the juniors, the way Ray, all the greats see the game, they saw that game since they were a kid. These guys aren't developed starting star linebackers, some small school guys they have, free agents. That's where you get in trouble. When people are criticizing Suh, I would say Suh's not balling by any means necessary. But his linebackers aren't taking the double teams off of him. They're not helping that guy. Our linebackers always tell us, go take a lineman off the big guys so that he'll work harder for you if you work for him. You're on point. The linebackers for the Dolphins are some of the most frustrating guys to watch because it seems like they're going to find blockers and not find the ball. No big plays. Don't really, get in there and rough it up. I wasn't a big sack guy or a great coverage guy, but you couldn't run my way. And after a while, people stopped. I was always the backside linebacker. They would make me that backside linebacker. I knew my strengths. You got to know your weaknesses. These guys are one of the, like I said, and I know some of them, so I'm not trying to be nasty, but you look on all the films, if you look on all those websites, the stuff I really don't like, but the new sabermetrics and all, they're one of the worst linebacking corps in the NFL. And it's because they're young and inexperienced. Laurinaitis, one of those guys, an older player. I don't know all the free agents this year, but to get a guy like that knows football would help out a lot. But you're dead on. I get frustrated, and I cover the Dolphins. I do the pregame, so I watch every game. I get frustrated watching this linebacker play to the pure fact that I can see what they're doing before they do it because I know what the offense wants them to do, and your job is to do what they don't want you to do. They fall right in the pace. If the guard's coming up, they'll stick behind him. If a guy pulls, they'll let him pull around and hit him. Go hit him. Go change the play. Go change the line of scrimmage. They just kind of play into their position more than doing my job, and then go making a play. And it's frustrating to watch that.
Okay, Channing, leading into the next question. Obviously, we're into the off season here, and there's a lot of people doing all their evaluations of the draft coming up, and this draft does seem to have some interesting prospects at the linebacking position, like Reggie Ragland and Jack Miles. And I don't know if you've watched much of them on film or watched much of them playing, but do you have a college linebacker that you have your eye on that you're interested in, or do you have a favorite right now in the draft class?
I just looked at this today. I was looking at some mock drafts, and who is it? Jalen Smith got tore his knee up out of UCLA, I want to say. He's not going to be ready this year. But everything you hear, and watch him play, he's a ball player. He's a hell of a linebacker. So the Dolphins don't have a year to hold a guy out. I don't know if they have a time to spend like a Todd Gurley with St. Louis, where you bring a guy in, see what he has, and then now Todd goes on to be the offensive rookie of the year. He can be a superstar, but I don't know if the Dolphins, the situation they're in, Adam Gase right now, which I thought was a terrible decision, Stephen Ross coming out to the media and saying that Adam Gase has 3 years and then you have to replace him. I don't know if they're in wait mode. So Ragland out of Alabama, I don't know if he'll be great at any position, but the great thing about him is that he can play outside linebacker in a 3-4, inside linebacker in a 3-4, inside in a 4-3, outside in a 4-3. So when you don't know if Neville Hewitt will develop, if you don't know what Cole Leach you're going to do with his salary, I think he's up to make $5 million or something this year.
4 or 5 million.
Get a guy that can play a bunch of the positions. So the guy at Alabama with the 8th pick might be high, but as a linebacker, he's one of the guys I like. But it's tough to say because I went 3rd round, started. Zach Thomas went, 6th or 7th round, and he's my most respected linebacker that I ever played with him in junior. So linebackers right now are like running backs are, really. You don't have to jump up in the 1st round to get them. There are some guys this year, Smith out of UCLA and Alabama guy, that are tempting, but I do believe you go get you a big fat man or you go get you a cornerback early. Hargrave out of Florida. If the guy from Florida State, that big old corner,
Jalen
Ramsey is a dog. And me being a Florida guy, I've asked people, because being the one, and I hate Florida State, the 1 and 2 corners, Florida State, but everyone I talk to, they say the guy at Florida State is the real deal. He's locked in. He's ready. He's pro-ready. Vernon Hargrave's a smaller guy, so I would have to say I give the edge, to Florida State guy, but cornerback, offensive line, quarterback, defensive end, that's what's running the league. That's what's making the league. The Dolphins will not change the outcome of next season going to get a linebacker in the 1st round, and it hurts me to say that. You know it does, because I love linebacking, I love defense. Where the game's going, 1st-round linebackers, you have to really be Ray Dam Lewis to take a top 10 linebacker, just where the game's going, all passing. You see what's happening to Vontaze Burfict right now. Those big linebackers, those aggressive linebackers, they're slowly but surely going to work out of the league because all you're going to do is get 15-yard penalties. The game's changing, the CTE, the concussion problems. I could wait till the 2nd or 3rd round to get a linebacker, probably 2nd tops. I would think more in the 3rd.
Well, I've always said the linebacker core is like there's a reason it's called the core. It's the core of the defense. Like everything, I understand that everything is fancier in the secondary and the defensive line. You have the pass rushers. Like everybody loves a pass rusher. J.J. Watt is the ultimate defender. He can do everything. He can even play offense if you want him to. You have the cornerbacks. Like these are the guys who make the leaping interceptions. Brent Grimes jumps up in the air and makes the one-handed catch against Megatron. Woo! Everybody's excited. Linebackers don't really do anything flashy, but oh man, if you don't have some good ones there, you are going to suffer. And I think the Miami Dolphins are going to have to start realizing that, even if that does mean, I would love, honestly, if they just went and got their guy even if it is the 1st round. I mean, they went and made a 1st-round draft pick on Jawan James, and I don't know if that, and everybody was saying that was a reach, and maybe it will be a reach because it doesn't look like he's going to be that 1st-round pick worthy kind of a guy right now. But if you have somebody that you feel like, okay, this guy is going to fix the linebacker core, or at the very least, make it better. I guess really all I'm saying is that please, for the love of God, remove Kelvin Shepard from the starting middle linebacker spot. Channing, I don't know if this is real or not, but I knew this guy. He said that he talked to a Buffalo Bills coach, and he told him, hey, this year our starting middle linebacker is Kelvin Shepard. That undisclosed coach laughed. So that's a problem.
It's tough, man, and we just talked about it. Their linebackers struggling, but think about the two. Who had the better linebackers in the Super Bowl, and who was the better defense? Because Brandon Marshall, the linebacker Brandon Marshall for Denver, and Trevathan are not great linebackers, but when they're playing with Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, now they're 100-tackle guys. Like I say, it kills me to say this. It hurts me. Linebackers are honestly one of your last things to worry about now where football is going. When I got in the league, when Saban got in, Dom Capers, the Steelers, they're still doing it. The Steelers are drafting linebackers left and right. The Steelers' offense is balling. What's going on with the defense? Why are they scoring 50 points but giving up 55? These linebackers, it isn't like it was with James Harrison, Joey Porter, Larry Foote, James Ferrier when they were up to the Steelers. They were changing games. Nowadays, you got $100 million bucked into your linebacking core, and they're throwing the ball 56 times a game. The game's going, and it'll swing. Trust me, it will swing back. Seattle swung it a couple years ago with their defense and their running game, so teams will start seeing that. But even Carolina Panthers, Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly, top duo out there right now, both Pro Bowlers. They didn't make a difference in that Super Bowl game like Aqib Talib, Chris Harris, Von Miller, we all saw, and DeMarcus Ware getting a lot of pressure. There's key positions that the Dolphins don't have those key positions. So we're talking about cornerbacks and DNs. Cameron Wade's coming off Achilles, and Olivier Vernon's a free agent. So we're having trouble there. To lock into the linebackers, who I agree with you, did struggle and struggled a couple years in a row now, without addressing the corners and defensive ends first, I honestly believe will be a mistake this year for the Dolphins if they go about it that way.
Okay, that's actually pretty interesting take on it. I've been saying for the past few weeks now that I would have preferred a linebacker, but you make some pretty good points there. I think I want to ask you one more question, and then I'm gonna go ahead and let you get back to your family. If you had to make a choice, if your GM Channing Crowder right now, you're on the clock at number 8, and let's just say for the sake of argument, everybody's on the board. Who are you picking and why?
Tunsil? Who's that gigantic boy from Ole Miss?
Jeremy Tunsil.
Jeremy Tunsil, him. Locked in. What's the boy? Joe Thomas type. Left tackle is going to play for you for 10 years. Tannehill will not be the most sacked quarterback. I said draft a fat guy. I love the Jawan James. I said get a fat guy over top of Devontae Parker. Things start up front. If they don't want to get a big fat guy, then like I said, go get one of these cornerbacks. But there are the 4 positions that I believe football runs around, and a lot of people these will interchange these 4. Quarterback's always first. It's a quarterback-driven league. Who has to protect him? The left tackle. Who's he throwing it at every damn play? The cornerbacks. And who's trying to get that guy on the ground? The defensive ends. And you look at those 4 positions for the Dolphins, not one of them is locked in. You don't know who your corners are this year. You don't know if Brent will be back, if he's going to take a pay cut. They just cut all the other cornerback. You don't know who's even starting on the other side. Ovi's a free agent. Cameron Wake's hurt. Brandon Albert, love him to death, great dude. There were a lot of charity work with him. Respectfully, he's a little long in the tooth. 30-plus years old, coming off a knee injury, didn't play at a high level this year for the duration, had some good games, but he was coming off that knee injury. Can he give you 16 games? And then Tannehill, we talked about him for 10 minutes earlier. We don't know what he has. So the top 4 positions in football, the Dolphins have none of them solidified, none of them to say we have a Pro Bowler at this position, this position, this position. I think we need to worry about those 4. But everybody on the board, I'm getting the big boy from Ole Miss. Realistically, one of those cornerbacks. The guy from Florida State will probably get taken early, everything I'm looking at now. So being a Florida guy, man, Hargraves Jr., undersized, but like I said, the league's not physical anymore. Brent Grimes is undersized. McCain's undersized. Sam Madison was undersized, if you want to think about it. So I would have to go with one of those top 4 positions if I was the GM. If I was Chris Greer, I would have to go with one of those big positions. You can't get a quarterback. Tannehill's making 19 or whatever it is, 17 this year. So one of those other 3, baby, I'd have to go with, and I'd lock into that philosophy.
All right, sounds good. Okay, I guess that means you would be willing to cut Brandon Alberts, or are you going to move him over to guard or something?
No. He big number. He's a double-digit guy, so, there's veteran minimums who, a lot of people don't know about where you can't take him down too far. He's going to make a bunch of money. If you get your young puppy in there at left tackle, you let Brandon Albert go somewhere else. Think for the future. Don't think for now. We don't know what this guy is. Well, let's develop him, but we know what Brandon Albert is. He's an expiring gallon of milk. And, it sounds kind of, it sounds heartless, but that's what the league is. I saw Junior Seau get cut. I saw Jason Taylor get cut. Zach Thomas get cut. Pastor Tane get cut. Sam Madison get cut. I played with 9 Pro Bowlers my rookie year. I saw every single one of them get cut in front of my eyes. That's what the game's about. Everybody's an expiring gallon of milk, and I think that Brandon Albert's date is soon, and I think one of these younger guys will have time to develop and be able to become that cornerstone tackle, that cornerstone lineman that the good teams have.
Even then, with Brandon Alberts, the Dolphins don't even have a backup tackle right now. I mean, they're Brandon Alberts at left, and if they can make it work, I have no problem. Maybe Brandon Alberts just can play right tackle and competes with Juwan James, or they slide him in guard. But I mean, just to have the depth, every year it seems like the Dolphins have an injury at the tackle position, and you end up with, the Colombos and the Jason Foxes and stuff at right tackle, and that just ends up with Tannehill getting his head taken off. So I don't have any problem, having a problem of having which of our 3 tackles should we be starting. I'd love to have that problem right now.
Oh yeah, and that problem was started by Jeff Ireland, Michael Egnew in the 3rd round. Some of these, I can go back with the draft picks. That's when that 3rd, 4th, 5th round is when you go get the guard from Idaho that no one's heard of, and in 3 years he's playing. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2nd round, who is it, Ali Marpet out of Eastern, Western, Northern Kentucky. He's a starting guard for them now. You lock in and you get those backup guards late in the mid-round draft, but Jeff Ireland's chasing ghosts for 3 or 4 years, and it set them. I think Jeff Ireland affected the offensive line more than anything. If you remember, when they first came in, they went out and got Jake Smiley, Jake Grove. They paid Vernon. They were going and reaching for these linemen. They weren't building the offensive line through the draft. So now we get in the part where Mark Colombo's starting for you, and he was a turnstile. I wasn't even a great rusher, and I could beat him. And then you got, Jason Fox last year, who was getting Tannehill destroyed from the blind side. I could have been out there doing what Jason Fox did. When you don't build the line, especially your backup through the draft, you can't go get a great guard. We saw it this year. We wanted a guard. We had to get a guard. Our guards are terrible. There's no guards available 3rd week of training camp. You have to get those guys, develop those guys, and get them in your system and start them playing. Get them going. 2nd year, 3rd year. 2 games in the 1st year, and then they're starting when you see they can play at this level. Bad drafts really affect offensive line depth because you can't go get 10 guys in free agency. And the offensive line is one of the deepest groups on a football team. So you have to have some young guys. And I think that the Tony Sperano, Bill Parcells regime, they neglected young linemen. They tried to bring in old goats for cheap and guys coming off injuries for cheap. We went 11-5 1 year, but then you slowly saw the team breaking down. You slowly saw more injuries. The offensive line went to hell because you weren't building the team correctly. You weren't building that offensive line depth correctly with young guys, letting them develop behind the older guys. 2 or 3 years in, you can have you a starting lineman. Everybody wants the guy to jump in and start the first week. This is the NFL. These are the best 1,800 players in the world. Bring a guy in, let him get used to it, let him get comfortable, develop him, and make him your star. You don't have to always draft a star. The great teams know how to develop players, and that's what the Dolphins haven't been doing.
I would definitely agree with that. Well, Channing, we've had you on for like half an hour now.
It's cool, man. The kids are asleep, man. I'm good.
Well, hey, if you want to stay on, like I won't stop you. But I wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that we didn't keep you away from your family for too long. But if you want to stay, like I'm not gonna stop you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's cool, man. I think these IPAs are calling me.
All right. All right. So we just got to go. I
think you good to go.
If you are.
Okay. Yes, sir.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us on. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir, man. Thanks for having me. I had a good time, brother. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, Channing.
Yes, sir. Bye.
All right. So that was Channing Crowder. You can follow him at Official Crowder. And Chad. I'm at a loss for words a little bit here, man.
I love Channing. He's not afraid to speak his mind, and a part of me just wishes he was wrong on a lot of the stuff he said, but he's just so right, and so it's just like, yeah, I mean, he's just vocally saying a lot of the stuff that I couldn't agree with more. I was hugely against Jeff Ireland. I thought he was doing a terrible job with this team in terms of bringing in developmental guys. They were trying for years to plug holes in the linebackers and the offensive lines through free agency. And I do agree with his philosophy in the draft that, your marquee guys or your defensive tackles and your offensive tackles are always marquee because there's just not that many. I don't know who said this. It might have been Bill Parcells, but there's just so many humans on this planet that are big enough and agile enough to be a defensive tackle and offensive tackle in the NFL. There's just not that many guys that physically can do it. And so you got to be able to get your hands on those guys, in the draft and keep those positions solidified. And, other than that, obviously the quarterbacks it's a have or have not league. And then, getting guys that can cover and getting good corners is difficult. And it's really difficult to get starting rookie corners. It takes them some time to develop. So I don't have any issue with his philosophy that you take that tackle or you take that corner in the first round. I think it would be a little bit of a luxury for Miami to take an offensive tackle, even though they desperately need one long term. They just, they have Brandon Albert and Juwan James right now, and they desperately need to address their linebackers. They desperately need to bring in a starting number one corner because I think Brett Grimes is best suited to be, like the number two corner or the 1B corner, and you need the other guy opposite for him, not just for this year, but you need a guy who's going to take that role over going forward because I don't see Brent Grimes going much more than a year or two max at this point. So they've got to address those positions, and it makes it hard to bring in an offensive tackle when you still have Brandon Alberts. And even though he is getting older and he is a risk, that'd be hard to use a number 8, overall pick on that. So that's anyway. Though Channing had some really good points, I thought.
He had a lot of good points, and dude spoke wisdom for us tonight, so I'm really appreciative for that. And we have another caller. I'm pretty sure I know who this one is too, but go ahead, reveal yourself, caller.
I didn't get to catch the Channing Crowder interview, so I'm sorry about that, but it sounds like it was really good.
Oh, it was really good, man. I can't wait for you to hear the playback.
Cool.
So,
yeah. I also like the fact that Chad quoted the Bill Parcells Planet theory. That's pretty awesome.
All right, so let's now that you're here, Keith.
It was Bill Parcells. I thought it was. I wasn't sure, so I agree with the thought of it, but I'm not a Bill Parcells fan at all. But I thought that's who said it.
No, I think he was with the Giants, or might have been. I forget where he was at the time, but yeah, that quote was pretty much in reference to being able to play defensive line in a 3-down lineman scheme. So, but I mean, it absolutely applies to tackles too. I mean, especially in today's game. I mean, you have to be so big and so strong, and you still are expected to have advanced agility, especially laterally, and that's just asking a lot of a person who's over 300 pounds. I mean, if you look at the game of football 30, 40 years ago, I mean, you could play offensive tackle at 265 pounds. Wasn't John Giesler, who was Dan Marino's left tackle early in Dan's career in the 80s? I think Giesler was not even 270 pounds. And you think about it, I mean, there's no way you could play it that way in today's game. So, I mean, it's just changed so much, and you have all these advanced expectations in terms of how you move laterally, how, are you quick getting to the second level? Can you target your blocks in the second level? Are you good getting downfield? I mean, I think about guys like Mike Pouncey when he came in, because everyone was I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people were incensed about the idea of taking a center at 15 overall. But I mean, Mike Pouncey and Marquise Pouncey brought unique gifts to the table in terms of being an offensive lineman. I mean, to be that big and move that well, you just don't find that often. So, and that applies to the top 2 tackles in this year's draft. And I totally agree with Chad. I would love to take a tackle at number 8 just because I would love to get younger and cheaper at the position. But, you always hear the term that your draft plans don't really come into focus until you're into free agency, and that couldn't be any more true for the Dolphins this year. I mean, you're going to have to see what happens with Olivier Vernon, because they have needs at all three levels of the defense, and if you're all of a sudden you're missing a top pass rusher, that's going to take some precedence over other positions that you'd otherwise look to fill early. So, I mean, it's pretty much a waiting game right now, and it's kind of frustrating. But this is a great year I mean, the Dolphins are in a great position because they need a lot of defensive help, and there's a lot of incredible defensive talent in this year's draft. And I keep seeing this thing where people are like, "Wow, there's not a lot of blue chippers." I think that term is a little bit overrated at this point. It's about finding the right guys for what you do, and if you're lucky enough to bring in a guy who's a top dog defensively, you can make it work with him. So a good year for the Dolphins lucked out. I mean, this is a great year to have the kind of needs that they have on the defensive side of the football, and I expect them to get a lot better defensively, or at least begin the road to getting better defensively, starting in free agency and especially in this draft.
Yeah, I agree, kid. I think I don't know how feasible it is, and Lewis always loves to remind me this isn't John Madden, but I hope the Dolphins get an opportunity to move down in this draft, because I am absolutely on board with getting a linebacker if that's what they want to do, but I would love to drop back into the 20s, somewhere, or late 20s even, and pick up an extra second or third round pick, because Miami just simply, they need players right now. They don't just need a position. They need multiple players right now, just not just starters, even depth. And that's the best way to do it, is to obtain more, get another second or third round pick, because those guys are so much more affordable, and that makes it a lot, more feasible to get those guys in here. Because I'm along the lines right now, I'll be shocked. The only way I believe Olivier Vernon returns to this team next year is if Miami decides to franchise tag him and just pay him, the $15 million for 1 year to buy themselves time. I don't believe they can afford right now, with the contracts they have in place, to give Olivier Vernon this massive deal that he's going to get. I mean, right now, this by no means is the consensus top 100, but I just pulled up the Pro Football Talk top 100, and I think it's fairly accurate to where these guys are going to get valued in the free agent market. Olivier Vernon right now is the 6th rated guy out there, and probably the 2nd rated pass rusher behind Von Miller, although Olivier Vernon's more of an every down DN than Von Miller is. But Olivier Vernon at his age and without any massive injuries is going to get he's going to get paid like he's a Pro Bowl elite end, which he's not. And so Miami needs to be very, very careful and stay away from giving him a massive contract, because if they do that with Olivier Vernon, and they already have that in there with Sue, they're putting so much money into a guy. I'm okay doing it with a guy like Sue, because Sue is elite. He's one of the best D tackles in the league. I don't believe Olivier Vernon is that good, so I don't believe they're going to give him the money, and I think you're going to see him go. And so that does open the door to defensive end in this draft. I mean, obviously linebackers, they need defensive ends, they need cornerbacks, a need. And so in a sense, it's good to what Keith is saying, because they can go any direction, and they can pretty much just give me the best defensive player available, and he's got a starting spot on this team. Unless he's like a D tackle, there's a spot for him to start. We need a starting safety opposite of Rashad Jones. We need a starting corner opposite of Brett Grimes. And so it won't be hard to plug that guy in, but I'm hoping that Miami needs to get 2 or 3 starters out of this draft minimum. And I'm a kind of a guy that, I know people get caught up on, like Mike Pouncey was a good example. Like, I can't believe he'd use a 1st round pick on a center. I really don't care, as long as the guy comes in, he's a solid above average to elite player, and he's going to play. I don't care. You just get that guy when you can get him, and get him on the field, because what loses football games are when you're playing guys that are below average. And it just seems like over and over, Miami, by the end of the year, that's the position they keep ending up in, is they have a lot of substandard players in there. And so I hope they just take this draft and start bringing guys in that can actually get on the field and actually fill those positions, whether it's, the kicker all the way to the quarterback. They need to be drafting starting players.
The Dolphins are in 2 unique positions in this draft, and you mentioned trading down. The number 8 spot is an interesting one because you could have potentially up to 3 teams taking a quarterback in front of you. And I understand that no one's mentioning Paxton Lynch in the top 10 right now. But again, like, we'll see what happens after the combine. And a lot of people are saying that Dallas, I mean, we know that Cleveland is going to take a quarterback. I mean, you're starting to see that that part of draft season where people are like, well, you know, maybe they won't. And it was really the same thing with the Dolphins in 2012 when you started to see people who were like, maybe they're not going to take Ryan Tannehill. Maybe they're going to go for Luke Kuechly. Maybe they're going to take you heard people saying, like, maybe they'll trade down for Quentin Copeland. I remember that was a popular one. Let's just assume that Cleveland takes a quarterback. Everyone is convinced at this point that Dallas is not going to take a quarterback. But you saw Mike Mayock come out today and say that he compared Carson Wentz to Andrew Luck. That's out there for me. That's extremely out there considering Andrew Luck's pedigree, playing at Stanford. The fact that he did a lot of that under the microscope. People were already hot on his trail by the end of 2010 going into 2011, and that was expected to be his last year. So you can't tell me that Jerry Jones isn't going to pay attention to Andrew Luck comparisons. I think that will probably get the Dallas machine running a little bit, especially because that team's best years in its franchise have always been built on franchise quarterbacks. You know, your Roger Staubach and Troy Aikman. They even had success with guys like Danny White. So that's something to consider. So if Paxton Lynch lights it up to the combine and all of a sudden people are starting to get hot trot about that guy maybe being a top 10, San Francisco's a team that could take a quarterback, and you can't rule out a team trading up ahead of them. Like I put out like just kind of like a off the cuff mock draft, and I had the Rams trading up ahead of the Niners to get a quarterback. So that's one thing. The other spot is you totally hit it on the head with Olivier Vernon. Has flashes, has done some things well, but is, in my opinion, not a franchise pass rusher. He's not anywhere near Cameron Wake's level where, he just is that kind of guy that other teams have to game plan for. Olivier Vernon does some things well, but is not, his skill set doesn't line up with the $15 million or the $15.5 million that goes to the franchise tag, or the 14 to 15 that his camp is asking for. Now, if the Dolphins play their cards right in this draft, you have a chance to find a better pass rusher who is far less expensive than Olivier Vernon. You can actually upgrade and save a buttload of cash in the process if you hit right. And this draft is strange in that the top 3 pass rushers, both Buckner and Spence right now, are all guys who fit different molds. Because you got Buckner, who's really, I think, most at home in a 5 technique if he's playing defensive end in a 3-4. Lewis and I watched some of his stuff last week, and the guy is just an absolute bull. He just holds up against double teams. He occupies space. He's a kind of guy. He's a Planet Theory guy for Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells would have been all about DeForest Buckner. And then Bosa, who is, in my opinion, an ideal 4-3 guy. He can probably do some edge rusher for you, but I think he's most at home in a 4-3, which would mean that he's probably most at home playing for a team like Miami. And then Noah Spence, who's kind of the wild card right now because he's got all the off-field baggage, but his on-field tape is just incredible. So you got these guys who fit different molds, and if you're the Dolphins and you get some of these guys moving up, you're hoping that the quarterback fits because you want teams fighting for those guys. DeForest Buckner right now has scouts validating like Pavlov's dogs. So you have to expect that he's going to be up there. And I know that a lot of people have Ronnie Stanley, the Notre Dame offensive tackle, following. I got to be honest, though, watching that guy's tape, knowing how athletic he is for being that size, he's about 6'5". I think he runs about 315-ish. That guy is incredible. Just, lateral agility for days. How much do you want? That guy has it. And he'd be the top offensive tackle in any year where Laramie Tunsil is involved, or maybe he probably would have gone ahead of Tyron Smith because Tyron Smith had the USC stink on him in 2011. But I can't see Ronnie Stanley falling that far. I think Baltimore would take him. Baltimore would be fortunate to get him. And if Ronnie Stanley can go high, then somebody's got to fall. And if you're the Dolphins, you love that because chances are the guy who's going to fall first is probably the guy who's got the least fanfare of the three in terms of pass rushers right now, and that's amazingly Joey Bosa.
I'd be ecstatic, even though you get the stigma of the Dolphins using number one on John Bosa. I'd love to get Bosa in here. I mean, I think he'd be an upgrade over Olivier Vernon, but I could be dreaming to get into fall, but you just never know. I will say, in terms of free agency, I believe what Miami should do, if these guys are available, is they should put their free agency money into a defensive back. And, Josh Norman would be ecstatic, but I just can't imagine the Panthers are going to let Josh Norman get away.
They're not going to let him get away.
Tremaine Johnson maybe will become available from the Rams. I'd be willing to pay him too, because I think even if Miami gets a corner with their 8th overall pick, I think that's kind of wishful thinking to believe that you can insert him in and start him on opening day. I mean, they'd have to, but it takes time usually in the NFL for those corners to get comfortable. And, if you want to be a competitive team, and you don't want to wait, get that guy tortured for 8 weeks and get burned until he starts picking up the game. Miami desperately, I think, needs another solid veteran corner that they can put in there, and then in particular they have, you just don't know quite sure what you have with Bobby McCain and Tony Lippett yet, and so knowing that you've got some youth in the cornerback position on the team right now with potential, that's where I put my money in free agency if I'm the team right now. I don't put it into defensive end or a linebacker. I think I draft those positions and I get that corner, and I don't have any issue drafting a corner with that, but I absolutely think they need a starting caliber boundary guy that they can start opposite of Brett Grimes before the draft even starts.
I agree. And Tremaine Johnson, I think, is going to be harder to keep now just because the Rams opened up things by cutting Laurinaitis, Cook, and Chris Long. But I'm with you. I was a Tremaine Johnson fan when he came out in 2012, and he would have been probably a first-round corner out of Montana had he not had some off-field issues. I know a lot of people had questions about his attitude and how he carried himself when he was playing in Missoula. So I'm with you, though, that there's so many things that need to be addressed. And it's kind of funny to think that what is your worst-case scenario in this draft? Suppose none of the guys you want are there at 8. What you take Vernon Hargraves? It's funny to call that a worst case scenario that you're getting the best cover corner in the draft. And I keep seeing these Mackenzie Alexander mocks to Miami, but if Vance Joseph is gonna mix in a healthy dose of zone coverage in Miami's defensive scheme, that's a Vernon Hargraves thing. In my opinion, that is not a Mackenzie Alexander thing.
I think that the key for this draft, if you have to, you take the best player available, and that would not break my heart if they took Hargraves at 8. But they want this quarterback type going, and you mentioned a couple of teams. The Browns absolutely desperately need a quarterback. The Rams desperately need a quarterback. I would say that the Jets desperately need a quarterback. I don't know if
they're keeping Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, but that's not.
And Houston,
yes. And there's teams that really need quarterbacks soon. They don't have to do anything crazy, but Dallas needs a quarterback. The Cardinals are a team that need a quarterback. The 49ers are up in the air. Are they going to let Kaepernick go or trade him? What's going to happen with him? And so the need in the league right now for quarterbacks is there are teams that need them badly. And they just, even if it's a little bit rolling the dice, it's hard to get your fan base excited and get people coming and feel like you got your team moving in the right direction if you don't have that franchise quarterback. Do people get excited, if you're going to go into the season without a young guy and Josh McDowell as your starter? To me, that's just like saying, we're going to be 8-8 if the team plays really well around him. And so I think that with this draft, there's going to be a team maybe that wants to make a move. And, Paxton Lynch could be that guy where he's probably not going to go the top 5 picks, but once you pass that round, if he's there at number 8, there may be a deal, to be made where, you get a team that wants him bad or 2 teams vying for him. Miami could be in that position where they could actually, pick up a few picks, and that would be ideal, because I do believe that, in the middle of this draft or even in the back end, in the 20s in this draft, Miami could probably still get the guys, just based on the needs they have, they can probably still get a really solid player that they can put on the field that'll fit right in. But getting that extra pick would be enormous for them.
It's
look
fun.
at Denver right now. Look at the quality. A lot of the guys that they've drafted, like your Sylvester Williams or Bradley Roby, a lot of those guys they picked up at the back end of round 1, early round 2. Derek Wolfe was an early round 2 pick. So those guys have mastered the art of nailing these defensive picks later in the first round. And I think that if any team's going to trade up, I don't know. I'm not privy to any details. I don't have any contacts. I wish I had sources just so I could say it and sound cool, but I don't. But I think that if any team's going to trade up, I think it's in the Rams' best interest. And a main reason for that is you're going to LA, you're going to go play in the Coliseum, which fits a gazillion people. If you want to even think about filling that place up, you got to get your franchise quarterback, because going there with Nick Foles isn't going to work. So that's a team that I would look in there. And I was mentioning some other, Hargraves, it would be, I think, a great scenario, because I think that he's got enough polish where even though cornerbacks take a little bit longer to come along in terms of defensive positions, I like him in that situation. But, for me, worst case scenario, it's still fantastic. What if we trade back and we roll the dice? And, maybe they take Jalen Smith and you have to wait. But, potentially you have just a knockout franchise linebacker. Reggie Ragland is another guy you go ahead and trade back. And I know a lot of people, the big knock against him is that he played in front of that Alabama defensive line. Well, guess what? He's going to have some pretty high caliber defensive tackles in front of him if he goes to Miami too. So it's not like he's going to step down in that regard. So that's the worst case scenario in my opinion, is that you trade back and you can get a leader in the middle like a Reggie Ragland. Maybe you roll the dice and you go with Jalen Smith, stay put, take Vernon Hargraves, or maybe there's even a guy they could shock us and trade back and take like an Eli Apple, who's a more physical corner, really a guy who came along and did pretty impressive things under Urban Meyer at Ohio State. So there's just all these options, and the important thing to note is that, as long as you're looking for defense in this draft, and if you're the Dolphins and you're absolutely starved for it on all 3 levels, there's very few scenarios that are, in my opinion, going to come across as disappointing long term. It might not be your guy. Maybe Bosa goes early. Maybe Dallas takes him. Maybe Jacksonville takes him. I don't think Baltimore would take him. I think a team would trade up with Baltimore to get him. But these incredible defensive tackles could rise. Sheldon Rankins is already a guy who's on his way up. Robert Kimdiche is a guy who was a top 10 pick until fell out of that hotel window. There's a lot to like about this draft, and the only thing that really disappoints me is I like the offensive tackles in this draft too. I love Ronnie Stanley. I'm a big Jack Conklin fan too, out of Michigan State. And one thing I was bringing up on Twitter today is people are going to watch DeForest Buckner's 2015 tape and just fall all over themselves because of the skills that he puts out there. The only thing that's missing is he doesn't really have good first step quickness. He's not incredibly sudden that way. He's more a guy who gets by on strength and technique. But his worst tape, in my opinion, of the 2015 season was against Jack Conklin when Michigan State played Oregon. And Buckner still got his at times, and there were times where Conklin needed a double team against him. But the cleanest tape anyone put together, any offensive lineman put together against Buckner, was Jack Conklin. And I think it's strange. I think that'll start to carry more weight as Buckner's height continues to rise. I think that the people who aren't in the know will just kind of toss him off as some sort of Deion Jordan clone. But this guy is so much stronger, so much more intelligent in terms of his approach to the game, and just a real, if you play your cards right, he's a cornerstone in your 3-4 scheme. And I think that teams like Chicago could be interested in trading up because that's what they need. Fangio's defense has always been built on or powered by just a penetrating, just incredibly brutal defensive end. So, I mean, there's so many scenarios, and honestly, we could spend hours talking about this, and it's exciting just because you hope that this works in the Dolphins' benefit and it uproots these players. It puts them, you like seeing them in a position where they have these options. They can trade back. They can get the guy they want. They can get a surprise guy at 8. Joey Bosa would still be a surprise to me, but I would love to get that guy in there. And I love that you brought up John Bosa because I already got one message on Twitter today when I put out that mock, and I had Bosa going to Miami, and some guy was like, no, I'm absolutely against Bosa. His dad was a bust. It'll never work out. And I was like, I don't know if that's the right logic that you want to go ahead and use in your approach to drafting, but sure.
It's actually funny that we're talking about this, and Keith, you were talking about quarterbacks. It's actually it's interesting because while he was with us, Channing brought up how this league is a quarterback-driven league, and obviously you know me, and I'm sure that I think you share this opinion too. I don't really like when people say that sort of thing because that's when people talk about it's all about the quarterback. It's all that matters. Just make sure you have a good quarterback and everything's good. But he said it. And he said it in such a way that I was okay with him saying how it's a quarterback-driven league. He brought up how there are 4 premier positions currently with football teams. Right now, it's quarterback, which is obvious, and left tackle, and defensive end, or a pass rusher, or more like, pass rusher is a better distinction because it could be a DE or a outside linebacker in a 3-4, and cornerback. Now, all of those positions, minus the quarterback himself, in some way, shape, or form, is about the quarterback if you really think about it. The pass rushers go after the quarterback. Cornerbacks are meant to make things difficult for the quarterback. And then you have, of course, the left tackle who protects the quarterback. So in a way, in that sort of context, I think that Channing is right, and I don't really have a problem with saying that because in that way of saying it, then yes, it is all about the quarterback, but not because the quarterback is the only position that matters, but because you see how many positions directly affect what the quarterback can do. And in that context, I would say yes, it is a quarterback-driven league.
Yeah, but those positions are all high earning too. I think for a while their cornerback was the number 2 highest earning position in the league, and I know left tackles up there. That's why Brandon Albert insisted on being a left tackle and not a guard for the payday. And pass rusher too. Channing Crowder is absolutely right. I would make the case that that's always been the case in the NFL. That I mean, quarterbacks have always gotten too much credit for wins, too much blame for losses. I mean, that's a term that you've heard from guys like Jim Kelly say. You can think back to the days of Joe Namath. I mean, and really, in my opinion, the guy who turned this into a quarterback league in terms of a marquee display and marquee presentation in terms of quarterbacks in the NFL would be Al Davis. I mean, Al Davis wanted these quarterbacks, these big guys who were charismatic, threw the ball downfield, the lady killers off the field. I mean, it was all about it. I mean, so this. I think when the only time it bothers me when people say it's a quarterback first league is when they act like it's the only position on the field and the other 21 really don't matter. And then it just becomes lazy. I had some guy arguing with me on Twitter this morning because I said, at this point, I'm still a Tannehill supporter. I need to see what he does under Adam Gase. But I watched a highlight reel of his last night, and I just laughed because at one point, you had people saying he couldn't throw the deep ball. And, I mean, he made plenty of deep throws last year, and he made some really difficult throws, like stuff that, I mean, you either get it or you don't. I mean, some nice bucket throws to the outside. I mean, the guy has talent. And I had someone telling me he's mediocre and nothing more. He's all shown us he needs to go. And it's like, well, that's just lazy at that point. And you just think well, if he's not working, then go to the quarterback tree and just pick another franchise passer off of it and just start over. And I'm not sure if it's just my generation and just thinking that you hit the reset button anytime anything appears to go south. But in terms of what Channing's saying, those are the 4 highest earning positions in the league and have been at one point or another. So, I mean, he's right. I mean, those are the ones that are the most visible. if you're on the offensive line, the most important position is left tackle. Although I'd make the case that with the quick passing game, you see a little bit less of a focus on the left tackle position by some people because there's less of a dependence to be able to hold up in pass protection longer. I still think it's incredibly important. I don't necessarily agree with that. But yeah, corner too. And you heard Vance Joseph say it when they asked him about how this defense is going to be structured. He said that it's all about being able to get to the quarterback. It's all about your ability to defend on the perimeter. So, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, and Channing's absolutely right.
Especially for the Dolphins with Sue in there. I mean, that's even more important that they've got to be able to do that because that's where teams are going to attack them.
Yeah, and we have about 15 minutes left in the show, but there's still time to call in if you want. If you want to call in, you can call 1-954-376-5704. We'll be glad to have you and hear what you have to say. Maybe you have something about Channing's interview with us. Maybe you have something you just want to say. So we'll take your call if you want.
I have something to throw out there real quick, Lewis. I did this one on Twitter, and I found this a very interesting topic, and so I wanted to see what you guys got while I have you here. And,
okay.
Basically, Paul Soliai got cut by Atlanta this weekend. And Paul Soliai is by no means a stud D tackle anymore.
And he's no spring chicken.
But what I was throwing out there is I just wanted people's opinion if you had to choose. And this is inconsequential salary, meaning he wouldn't cost any more if not less. If you have the option, do you pick Paul Soliai to be the third D tackle, rotating in there with Sue and Phillips, or would you rather just stick with Earl Mitchell? And I had a very 50-50 response on that, so I'm just curious what you guys think.
Well, first of all, I'm shocked that you have 50-50 because most of the people that I talk to are like, get Earl Mitchell out of here. He's useless. Like, oh, well, okay. That's your...
Well, it's not like I'm debating on who should be the starting D tackle. I out there that Sue and Phillips should be your starters, but they need another solid D tackle rotating in there with those guys. And that guy right now is Earl Mitchell, but I'm leaning a little more towards Soliai, even though he's usually too heavy and he's not going to give you much of a pocket push, resting the passer, but he's so big and he anchors so well. I think he would immediately, you put him in alongside Sue, it's going to be nearly impossible to run the football up the middle, which has been a huge weakness they've had, for the last few years. And so I was kind of advocating a little bit, but I was just stunned at how polarizing it was. It was really both sides.
I would go Soliai just because I think he's got a lot left in the tank. Just watching the past few years, I don't think he's lost much. And it's not like he was ever like a master penetrator at the one tackle position or the one technique, excuse me. But I mean, he can't do that. I mean, he's a load. I mean, if he's playing at 340 pounds, you feel like he's playing light. But I love the idea of the complement at one technique of Paul Soliai in there. And then can you imagine if you're an offensive line, interior offensive line, you have to deal with Paul Soliai, and then he goes out and you have to deal with Jordan Phillips, who is more of a disruptive, penetrating one technique defensive tackle. Nobody wants to deal with that. And I mean, it's
not to mention both of them are playing alongside Sue all the time. And so my thought was it's hard you're definitely not going to move Paul Soliai with a one-on-one block. And I saw that happen on film multiple times with Earl Mitchell where, they would double Sue and then they would have one guy but would be able to successfully move Mitchell out to allow him to run the football. That was how a lot of teams attacked him. And I just thought, well, you put Soliai in there, what you're giving up in the pass rush, you're completely plugging that middle up. I mean, the middle is shut down. Now, granted, they still need, linebackers that can run, side to sideline, but I was pushing for it. I thought, I would think for what Earl Mitchell's getting paid, you could probably, and I heard him express interest in returning to Miami. That's what got me fired up about it. I'm like, I think you could let Earl Mitchell go, and for that amount of money you save on the cap, you could replace him with Paul Soliai. But whether or not that's the right move, that time would tell.
I'd like to keep them both, perfectly honest. If Paul Soliai wants to come home, that means that it's like how badly does he want to come back to Miami and play in his I guess this is his hometown. He keeps saying about he comes home to Miami, so I guess he lives here or whatever. So if that's the case, then sure, bring him on. I would love to have him back, but I wouldn't just throw Earl Mitchell to the wayside
for a long time. But
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to.
He's probably
Say again.
well. He can afford them both. And Earl Mitchell's about a $3 million. I want to say cap hit. I think Earl Mitchell's
Chad, we're having trouble hearing you, man.
no. That's the difference on the cap. Possibly in here for that. I don't think
we're having trouble.
Sorry, is that any better?
No, I think there's something wrong with the connection. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Personally, I just like to keep both Paul. I would like to bring Paul Soliai in, but still keep Earl Mitchell. I mean, Earl Mitchell is making what, $4 million this year, and that's not a whole lot of money for somebody like you want. If people want wow-worthy play from their defensive tackle, but for $4 million, Earl Mitchell is good, and he's worth what he's making. It's not like he's making $8 million or just stand there and do nothing. Okay, so with that in mind, if Paul Soliai returned and you have Earl Mitchell there already, and you have Ndamukong Suh, and then you have Jordan Phillips, that's a pretty good rotation at defensive tackle, because last year was C.J. Mosley, and he did all right. But I think what the problem here is that we're looking to replace the wrong guy. Now, let's look at it from a different perspective. If you had to make the choice between C.J. Mosley or Paul Soliai, then who do you pick? Because for me, I think it's a no-brainer. I would pick Paul Soliai without even thinking twice.
Well, can you hear me better now, Louis?
No, not really. I think there's something wrong with the call. Chad, hang up and call back in. Let's see if that works. So,
I'm with you. If it came down to those two guys, I would definitely take Soliai. Especially I love the idea of being able to spell him with Jordan Phillips and vice versa. And as Chad brought up, both guys would be playing alongside Ndamukong Suh, so that opens up Suh to fewer double teams as opposed to last year when he was just eating constant double teams and sometimes triple teams throughout the year. That frees him up. And if you're in a scenario where you're able to upgrade your pass rush game to this draft, you could have a pretty impressive defensive line and some really important building blocks going forward.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I would like to. We just had a caller, but I think something went wrong, and he kind of disappeared. So, caller, if you are still there, make sure to call back in, and we'll get you back in there. So, sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, I think what the issue is with the whole Paul Soliai thing is that you are they're looking to replace the wrong guy. It's not Earl Mitchell that needs replacing right now. It's C.J. Mosley. There is practically no replacement out there right now that we can actually count on. And with that in mind, it becomes a problem. So if I am the Dolphins, I'm bringing in Paul Soliai and keeping Earl Mitchell there, because that is a rotation that I would like to have. That's a decent defensive tackle rotation. You have Ndamukong Suh, Earl Mitchell, Jordan Phillips, and Paul Soliai, then yes, that I would like. But if you remove Earl Mitchell and try to replace him with Soliai, then we're still down a defensive tackle, and that I don't like.
I agree with you. Just going forward, I'm not a huge fan of Earl Mitchell, but mainly it's because of a cost perspective. But if you're talking about depth on your interior defensive line, then yeah, definitely a quality piece to have in there. And I mean, it's just all of that. It just makes things easier on your second level, especially inside. And if you're going to go ahead and you're going to bring in a young guy, suppose it's like a Reggie Ragland, or if they wait a little while and they put someone else. I mean, you name it. at inside linebacker or middle linebacker in the 4-3. It's just a lot easier to come along and pick up the game and learn at the NFL speed if you have that level of beef playing in front of you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch gears here. We're gonna go ahead and switch to the last topic that I had for the night, and it's the NFL Combine. It's almost time, ladies and gentlemen. They're gonna people are headed off to Indianapolis. I think the Combine. When does it start, Keith? Does the Combine officially start tomorrow?
The interviews start tomorrow in terms of coaches and whatnot, like Adam Gase. I think talks tomorrow. I'm interested to see that.
Yeah, at about 3:45.
Yeah, I think the interviews are, or I should say the press conferences are Wednesday and Thursday, and then I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the actual schedule. It used to be that you had the offensive line start on Saturday, and then you had quarterbacks, receivers, and running backs on Sunday, linemen and linebackers on Monday, and then corners on Tuesday. I think it's different now. I think they start. They might start a little earlier. I know they did last year because I know that all the wide receivers ran on Friday. So I'm not sure what the actual schedule is, but yeah, technically things get underway tomorrow in terms of those press conferences, and it'll be cool to hear Adam Gase give that sort of first formal out of house interview in terms of representing the Dolphins as head coach.
Okay, so now here's the question I have for you, Keith. Now, you're a draft guy. You like to watch these guys for the Dolphins and see if you can find some decent draft prospects for them. Now, my question to you is, how much stock do you take in the NFL Combine? Because all these people love to watch the 40-yard dash and all this fancy schmancy stuff. Like, everybody loves to hype up the 40-yard dash because everybody loves to see how fast these guys can run in their underwear. So, if you are a draft prospect, you're watching. If you're a draft guy, you're watching these guys. You're keeping an eye on what they're doing. How much stock do you take in how they perform in the combine? And do you think it's a waste of time, or is there actually something that can be learned from this whole thing?
Well, I think I wouldn't say that there's something that can be learned. There are things that can be confirmed. The old adage, I've heard it the past few years, is that you just want what happens at the combine to confirm everything that you've seen a player do on tape. I think that's one of Mike Mayock's classic lines, but it's really true. Like for instance, if you're watching a cornerback, let's use Mackenzie Alexander for an example. The one thing that we mentioned early on watching his tape when I finally got around to seeing a lot of him was we noted how natural, quick, and flexible his hips were when he was flipping them in coverage. I mean, he just looks incredibly comfortable turning and running with his assignments. And, I mean, that's something where, so when you watch him do that at the combine, you expect him in those backpedaling drills when he's going to flip his hips and then run upfield. It will be surprising if he looks stiff or if he struggles in that drill. And if he doesn't, or if he does struggle, then it's the kind of thing where you wonder, like, okay, well, what's going on there? You know, is he hurt? Was there something going on in tape? Like, was I deceived? It'll be a strength thing for some guys, like Ronnie Stanley. One of the few knocks against him is that he lacks just strength. You know, I hate the term finesse tackle mainly because of Jonathan Martin. But Ronnie Stanley, a lot of people look at Laramie Tunsil and they're like, well, Laramie Tunsil weighs like 10 pounds less than Ronnie Stanley and yet looks considerably stronger on tape. So the bench press can kind of help with that. Ronnie Stanley, I expect to absolutely burn down the combine in terms of offensive lineman drills. His lateral agility, his ability to mirror pass rushers, all those drills, I think he's just absolutely going to murder. But yeah, so and sometimes you can, I don't know if I would say learned. I prefer confirmed because, I mean, sometimes, like, if you have a certain player who you think is, like, not that fast and then they run incredibly fast there, like Ryan Swope is a great example. I think he was a 4.3 guy at the combine. when he ran there, and he looked like maybe a 4'5", 4'6" guy playing at A&M and catching passes from Ryan Tannehill. So at that point, you think like, well, what's going on there? So you'll have weird anomalies like that. But I just want to watch the combine this year. Reggie Ragland, I hope that he runs a decent time. If he can get in the 4.7 range, I'll be pleased. I fear that he'll be. I think he's going to get the Ray Malaluga thing where he's this highly touted, prolific, successful middle linebacker or inside linebacker in college, and then he runs a poor time, and all of a sudden, he falls like Luka fell to the second round in 2009. So, that's the kind of stuff that can happen, but it should be to confirm. You should already have a decent idea of what you're looking for and a player's skill set and makeup heading into it. And the one thing we're not privy to, well, unless stuff is leaked, the most important thing about it are the interviews sometimes that these guys are going to do. Noah Spence, I guarantee you the most important interview out there this weekend is going to be when teams talk to Noah Spence, because his tape is mind-boggling. That guy's an incredible edge rusher. But, he got busted with, tested positive for ecstasy twice. Couldn't play at Ohio State. If you're too much of a risk for Urban Meyer, something's wrong. And at the end of Ohio, his time at Ohio State, they were drug testing him. He was clean. When he went to Eastern Kentucky, they're drug testing him. He was clean. So you hope that trend continues, and I hope he does, because he's a lot of fun to watch. And he's another guy who gets up there and maybe becomes, I don't know, maybe, I don't see him as a great fit for the Dolphins, but maybe he pushes out a guy who is a great fit. So that's, the interviews are a huge part of it too. And one example I have, I'm kind of rambling here, but I have so many thoughts when it comes to this kind of thing. Cordero Patterson, when out of Tennessee, when it was at the combine, it was leaked almost immediately that teams couldn't have been less impressed with his interview. Just came off, it didn't seem like he cared, didn't seem like he really comprehended things. And then you've seen his time in Minnesota, that's absolutely been the case. So when you hear things like that, and then when you see it actually come to fruition and it proves to be true, you think like, well, okay, there's something important to be gained here.
Well, the interview process, I'm like, you've seen, I don't know if you saw the article that I retweeted today, but this whole idea of the stupid things that prospects have to answer nowadays. It's like, if you had the opportunity, I think one of the questions, so something along the lines of, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you? And I'm like, what?
There was, if you could kill someone and get away with it, would you do it? Are you attracted to your mom? Which I wonder if Jeff Ireland was the one who asked that. There were some really. The only thing I can think, and that's kind of like that's a psychology trick right there, is, and you always use extreme examples to get a reaction. So while that sounds incredibly, effed up to ask somebody something like that, I think they want to see the reaction. They want to gauge how a person responds to something that off the wall and that bizarre and that weird. Like, do they just immediately take offense? Do they try to analyze and try to work with you and try to figure out what's going on? There are things that you can learn about a person. Pretty much what you're doing is you're making them uncomfortable. And you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about a person when they are feeling awkward or feeling uncomfortable. That's when true colors sometimes come out. So that's the only reason I can imagine why somebody would ask something that messed up. Either that or the guy was just an absolute pervert.
I think in that case, I would just give the guy a blank stare, because it's like, you just asked me if I'm attracted to my mom.
Does the guy get mad? Does he take offense? Does he just kind of brush it off and say, like, that's your deal, it's not mine? There's stuff to be gained from there. That's some pretty complex insight into the mind of the football player you're interviewing. But if you're going to pay a guy, I'm not defending, asking a player who's attracted to his mom. That's really sick. Or if you definitely get away with it. But I guess
that's the Oedipus complex.
Yeah, if you're gonna pay a guy millions of dollars, I guess you really want to get in there and see what who you're employing. So that's the only thing I can imagine. That was my thought when I read it too.
Well, in any case, I don't think you brought up Reggie Ragland. I think the one thing he may not do is the bench press. I think because apparently some shoulder injury, some shoulder minor lingering whatever. So we might not see Ragland lift, which I don't know. I guess it's like some of this stuff does it really matter if you can bench press all this weight, and if you can be the strongest dude in the combine, but if you don't have technique, it's not really going to matter. So there are things to circumvent. This is why I think maybe some people took too much stock in the combine. You brought up Ryan Swope ran a 4.3 in the combine, and then at Texas A&M he looked way slower than that. So there's a lot of stuff about the combine that it intrigues me, but at the same time it's like all this stuff could really be a waste of time unless something really weird shows up, like we already knew.
Yeah, I want to see. Reggie Ragland looks strong to me on tape. Mello Kiper just described him as a thumper. I would agree. I want to see how he runs, and I want to see how he looks because they're going to put him in drills where he's moving in space. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. I mean, does he look better than he did at times at Alabama, or I mean, is it pretty much a trend with him? And I mean, Ragland's a top 5 prospect for me in the draft. I love him. I love inside/middle linebacker prospects. I always have. When you grow up watching Zach Thomas, it's hard to. You always want that position to be covered and covered well. So I'm interested to see with a lot of stuff that they do with him. Let's face it, if you're a Dolphins fan, the defensive line and linebacker workouts are, in addition, the cornerback stuff, probably going to be your areas of focus. So I mean, you're more interested to see the back half of the combine rather than the beginning. But I like Reggie Ragland. I laugh at Dolphins fans who criticize the fact that he had such an incredible defensive line at Alabama. If he went to Miami, he'd have some incredible defensive line talent in front of him as well. So hardly a drop off.
Well, I was one of those people, Keith, who was like, I don't know, because how many linebackers have been augmented by their defensive lines? We thought Ndamukong Suh was going to be able to do incredible things, but then we found out he's just one man. So the whole Kelvin Shepherd thing fell on its face. But I'm not trying to say that Reggie Ragland's Kelvin Shepherd. That's ridiculous.
I understand. It only goes so far. You only benefit from the guys in front of you if you actually have talent too. And the fact that even if Ndamukong Suh is occupying multiple blocks and Jordan Phillips is occupying multiple blocks, and the offensive line can't get a hat on a hat in terms of blocking the second level, it's great. Now your inside linebacker is unblocked. Now he's free to make plays. It helps if that guy actually has talent. And I mean, I don't mean to be brutal, but in that description, but Kelvin Shepherd is not a leader. He's not the guy that should be piloting the second level of defense that Miami has. They have something good in Jelani Jenkins, but I think he's only as good as the linebackers playing alongside him. I think that he would be so much better and so much more productive if he had better talent playing with him on that level, at the second level. So I would certainly. I mean, if you watch Reggie Ragland play and then you watch Miles Jack play, I mean, you're gonna see some stark contrast in terms of how those two play the game. But Miles Jack is kind of like a Swiss Army knife playing a linebacker, and even if you play him at safety, I mean, the guy is incredible in coverage, can rush the passer. He's just an incredible physical specimen in terms of athleticism. I mean, you've got Reggie Ragland, who's kind of like your classic lunch pail middle linebacker, and I think that's probably one of the reasons I like him. He reminds me a lot of the great linebackers of the 70s and 80s in terms of these guys who were not necessarily physical specimens. I know it's hard to compare the game in the 70s to the game today, but look at a guy like Jack Lambert playing in Pittsburgh. Hardly a physical specimen. The guy was not very heavy. I think it played it like 215 or 215 somewhere around there, which for a middle linebacker back then it was, I mean, incredible, and still is incredibly undersized. But I mean, just had the will, just had the football mind and the drive and the passion to be great at that position. And I mean, I want to be able to see that from Reggie Ragland. I like the fact that he's a classic go to work kind of guy. He's in there. There's nothing sexy about his overall game, whereas Miles Jack is just an absolute. I mean, that guy is just it's like a circus watching that guy play. It's entertaining to see that guy and what he's able to do. But I like Franklin. He's a throwback type linebacker, and I'm hoping that he tests well, because while I would like to, it's kind of selfish, but there are times where I don't want a guy to test well because I like to see him fall a little bit. But with Reggie Ragland, I think he's going to be a good player. I'd like to see him test well. I'd like to think that he's in consideration for Miami if they're in a trade down scenario.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 9:40. We've been going for about an hour and a half now, a little over. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. I want to thank everybody who joined us for this, tuned in this evening. I want to especially thank Channing Crowder for joining us for the about half hour on the show. Awesome insight into how the NFL works, the Miami Dolphins. That was awesome, and I'd love to have you on again if you're still listening. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. For myself, my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and, of course, Keith Beebe of the Finsider with the PH, who joined us very recently. And, ladies and gentlemen, I just need to point this out. Mr. Keith Beebe has a new Twitter handle, so it is no longer KMB8488. It is now at Keith Dolphin. That's KEEF Dolphin. So why Keith? Why Keith? Keith?
It's well, I've been playing guitar for like almost 20 years. I've been playing in a lot of bands, and a lot of people call Keith Richards. That was like his nickname, and so people started calling me that. And I like the two nicknames I had as a kid were Keith and Kiki, and I definitely prefer the former. So yeah, I don't know. I just seem like I use that name if I'm on Reddit. I mean, that's my name there. It's everywhere else. So I don't know. It's just, and it's hard to spell out like a KMBA 488 to people. Just say like, hey, yeah, that's my Twitter handle. It's a little bit complicated. This one's simpler, and I don't know. I think it looks cool. It's probably nerdy to everyone else, but I don't care.
All right. Well, I just wanted to point that out to everybody. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you all next time for another episode of PhinManiacs Live.